Hey, all right. Welcome back to another episode here at MSA. Glad you could be here. So glad to see you again. Now, listen, today President Trump came out and said some words, and we all know, if we're paying a little bit of attention, that today was the day that he was going in front of the courts to talk about presidential immunity. Now, everybody and their mother wants to talk about that. We're going to get a little bit deeper than that. Before we do, like, share, and subscribe. We need your help on that. Please like, share, and subscribe. We also need you to hit the like button. There's a couple things weird about the channel, but we'll get into that on another day. But share with everybody you know. We'd appreciate that. Okay, back into what we're talking about. So President Trump is in a clip that we're going to roll in a second here, and he got up and he talked to the camera directly. What was he talking about? Joe Biden. Why was he talking about Joe Biden? Well, you're going to see that in the clip. It's really important for you to watch this because his words actually mean a lot. You have to remember, a former president, they know a lot. They hear a lot. They see a lot. They have very reliable information. They know what disinformation is. They know what crooked and corruption is. They know who's who, what's what, who's got a gambling problem, who's got, marriage issues. They know a lot of things, okay? Because everybody knows everybody and everybody knows what's going on. And when Trump says some of the things that he says, you need to pay attention. And the reason is because the guy's not lying, okay? He hasn't been lying at all for a long time. But what happens when the mainstream media gets a hold of it? Spin every single time. So I want you to hear what he has to say, and then we'll get back into saying what I have to say. All right? All right. See you in just a minute. Go ahead and watch this clip and enjoy President Trump.
Because of Joe Biden, I spend a lot of time in courts, federal, state, city. And tomorrow I'll be attending another Biden-inspired federal appeals court argument on presidential immunity in Washington, D.C. Of course, I was entitled as President of the United States and Commander-in-Chief to immunity. I'm entitled to immunity. Every president has immunity, especially one that did the job I did. I did a great job. And I wasn't working for myself. I was working for the country. I wasn't campaigning. The election was long over. Wasn't campaigning. I was looking for voter fraud, something that I have to do under my mandate. I have to look for voter fraud. And I was finding it. Tremendous amounts of voter fraud in the 2020 election. We have volumes of information. It's all there. And I was doing my job, which I had to do. And it's my obligation to do. And otherwise, running our country and running it well. We didn't have Russia going into Ukraine. We didn't have Israel under attack. We didn't have China talking every day about going into Taiwan. We didn't have inflation. We had a great economy. If I don't get immunity, then crooked Joe Biden doesn't get immunity. And all of the things he's done to allow the border invasion, millions and millions of people coming into our country, many from prisons, jails, mental institutions, insane asylums, many terrorists coming into our country. That's really allowing insurrection, and come into a situation where he allowed the surrender to Afghanistan. We surrendered, the United States of America surrendered to Afghanistan, where we gave them $85 billion worth of free, the best military equipment anywhere in the world, left thousands of hostages behind, and they were American hostages behind. Still there, many of them. And 13 dead soldiers and many soldiers so badly hurt. This is gross incompetence. We did a surrender in Afghanistan. Nothing's ever been so embarrassing in the history of our country. Also, the millions and millions of dollars that went into Joe Biden's pockets with money from foreign countries like Russia, Afghanistan, China, many others. I mean, Joe would be ripe for indictment. So you're saying that Trump shouldn't get immunity, but Joe Biden would? I didn't do anything like he did. I ran a great country. This guy's gotten $3.5 million from the mayor of Moscow's wife. What's that all about? And that's the least of it. One of the reasons he's so soft on China is because he received a lot of money from China, and he's afraid to do anything about it or say anything because he knows He's afraid to say, we have a Manchurian candidate in Joe Biden. We have to get him out. By weaponizing the DOJ against his political opponent, me, Joe Biden has opened a giant Pandora's box. As president, I was protecting our country and doing a great job of doing so, and the historians will be saying that. They already are. But just look around at the complete mess that crooked Joe Biden has caused. He's the worst president in the history of our country by far. He's also the most corrupt president.
You see what he was talking about in that? He's talking about all the things that have been going on and how he knows that this witch hunt is coming from Joe Biden. He knows, and he, of course we use the name Joe Biden, but there's other people behind all of that, but they're all behind Joe Biden. I especially like the comment that he makes in there when he talks about how he became president where somebody else was supposed to become president. That was kind of made me chuckle. I won't say anybody's name like Hillary. But either way, you know, moving forward, when he starts talking about voter fraud and all that, and they say, oh, he went in front of all these courts and the courts said no, that people didn't dive into all of this. They didn't go deep into to figure out what was going on. But there's another part of what they talk about voter fraud, because what they're also describing is there's 16 states out there that don't require your ID when you vote. Okay? So there's a lot to be said about that. And just so you're completely on the same page, 9 of those states are sanctuary states. Okay? You know what a sanctuary state is? Those are states where the illegal immigrants that are pouring in take refuge. Okay? And as they take refuge, when it comes to voting time, it says you can't vote on federal, you know, if you're not a legal citizen, but, you know, you don't have to show your ID either, and I'll let you put 2 and 2 together on that one because I'm not going to get into conspiracy theories right now. But it has a lot to do with what's been said by Mike Johnson, by what was said by many people, actually. I'm not even going to get into this list. Now, going into this a little bit further, when he talks about not having immunity, you know, you got to think about what he's saying there. We've all watched his speech for January 6th. You want to call that an insurrection? I mean, seriously, you want to call that an insurrection? I could go back in history and do a ton of videos on what would look like more of an insurrection. People getting upset, throwing fits, pointing fingers, calling people out, screaming their face off. I mean, you really need to think hard about this, because I know the people watching this understand where I'm coming from when I say that. I'm not challenging anybody's intelligence. Think about it. How many people were at the Capitol? How many people were guarding the Capitol? Okay, real simple there, right? Because if you look at it, remember CHOP, when the people took over the police station? Because they outnumbered the police. When they did when other cities had problems like that, it's because the crowds outnumbered the authorities. January 6th was no different. You had a ton of people. And I'm just going to bring this up real quick. I still find it really hard to understand why when Trump asked Nancy Pelosi to send 10,000 more National Guard to the Capitol for that day, she denied it. I'm still trying to figure this out. How this became an insurrection. When it's the Capitol Police guy even said that Trump did this. So we know that Trump was trying to stop something, not start something. And by the way, insurrection, such a loose term. Okay, when I've read this 14th Amendment upside down, backwards, sideways. The only thing I haven't done is read it standing on my head. And I'm telling you, what he did is not an insurrection. Okay, and I'm not a constitutional attorney, but to become a constitutional attorney, you have to study the Constitution. I've been doing a lot of that. I'm telling you, it's not an insurrection. Now, going forward a little bit more, we sit here and we talk about Trump, Biden, and what's the real issue here. The real issue? President Trump talked about it. $85 billion in military equipment left behind when we evacuated Afghanistan. $85 billion worth of our high-tech military equipment. Why would you give that away? That doesn't make any sense. That does not make sense. The other part, too, is when he talked a little bit about the China issue. Okay, China and Joe took office. He immediately got rid of the spy program that had to do with the Chinese. When the Chinese leader comes over, the dictator himself shows up, and they have their little talks. It's funny because the Chinese guy does all the talking, and Biden doesn't. When you look at how the Chinese are, and I'm not talking about the ethnicity, okay? I'm talking about the Chinese government. When you look at how they're dealt with from the American side with Joe Biden in office, you can be plain as day see the fact that he handles that with kid gloves because he doesn't want anybody blowing the whistle on him. I have a feeling it's very, very dirty, and after the election, we're going to find out, okay? So let's go into a second clip. You know, he said, President Trump said a wonderful thing right there, and he said the historians are going to, continue to talk about the work that Trump did. And now let's look at Mark Levine. Mark Levine is going to paint a picture here of Joe Biden because, you know what, we don't get to hear that. We really don't. We get to hear all about Trump and madness and chaos and worst of everything and how Bidenomics is the best of everything. But we never get to hear really all the meat and potatoes behind Joe Biden. So, I found this clip that's got Mark Levine talking about Joe Biden. And it goes kind of back to the beginning. And we're going to paint a picture of the character of Joe Biden because it's amazing how Joe Biden painted the same character of of Donald Trump. When in fact, that character is Joe Biden. Now, we're going to roll this clip, and when we get done, we'll be right back to talk to you about it and see how you feel about it. All right. See you in a minute.
Joe Biden wants this election to be about Hitler versus George Washington. And, of course, he's George Washington and Donald Trump's Hitler. I want to remind some of you that the Democrat Party uses the Hitler card as much as they use the race card, as much as they use all their cards. They called Barry Goldwater Hitler. They called Ronald Reagan Hitler. They called George W. Bush Hitler, and now they call Donald Trump Hitler. But the real Hitlerians in the world, they don't call Hitler. They don't call Xi Hitler or Putin Hitler or the regime in Iran run by Hitler. They don't even call the head of Hamas or Hezbollah Hitler. No. It's only conservatives and Republicans who are Hitler. Pretty sick. And for those Holocaust survivors out there, on behalf of a nation, our nation, I want to apologize to you. The way the Democrat Party and the media throw around that word Hitler. When you look at your arms and you see burned numbers into your flesh, and you know who Hitler was and the Third Reich was, and to watch the likes of MSNBC and CNN and the pages of the New York Times and Washington Post throw around Hitler like it's no big deal. It's pretty sick. But they will stoop to anything and everything for power. So there's Joe Biden. He's giving a speech at Valley Forge. He was going to give it on January 6th, but inclement weather, they decided, just in case, they move it to January 5th. No George Washington there. We know what took place at Valley Forge, one of the worst winters in modern American history. The deaths, the disease, and the great commander of our armed forces during the Revolution, George Washington, a future president. He withstood it all, but not Joe Biden. He just wants to use George Washington, which is amazing to me, since the Democrat Party has been attacking the founders of this nation as white supremacists and slaveholders. But there he is. He wants to remind you about George Washington and the American founding in our history. Joe Biden, who supports the 1619 Project, which destroys the whole idea that the nation was founded in 1776. It's amazing, is it not? Joe Biden, who supports CRT and ESG and DEI, talks about white supremacy, the seed of white supremacy, the American Revolution, the Declaration of Independence, the Constitution, as they wave around the Constitution. All of a sudden they need it and they use it. These are liars. These are scam artists. They want to talk about democracy. That's fine, even though we're a constitutional republic. We don't have a parliamentary system like Israel, Britain, and Italy. We'd be a very different country. Our framers worked hard to create a republic, a constitutional representative republic with 3 branches, with a constitution, with limited powers. So Joe Biden's giving speeches about a subject he knows nothing of and a constitution he swore to uphold that he apparently hasn't read. In the 1970s, Joe Biden, you joined Senate Democrat racists and segregationists, including James Eastland and John Stennis of Mississippi, Herman Talmadge of Georgia, Robert Byrd of West Virginia, in opposition to integrating our public schools. And as many scholars have written, you weren't just an observer or a minor partner. You were one of the leaders. You were one of the leaders. You befriended Eastland when you came to the Senate. You befriended Stennis. You wrote love letters to each other. We have those. Stennis gave you the actual desk on which the 1956 Southern Manifesto was written and signed. A manifesto, a racist segregationist manifesto that America will never be integrated, not the South anyway. And you considered it an honor to receive that desk. You knew Eastland and Stennis and Robert Byrd, who you called your mentor, led the filibuster against the 1964 Civil Rights Act, but you didn't care. In 1977, you said, unless there's orderly integration, I quote you, orderly integration, my children are going to grow up in a jungle, the jungle being a racial jungle, unquote. It's about the most racist statement I've ever heard a president make, certainly since LBJ.
All right, you got to see that clip. What'd you think? Levine gets a little heated in there, doesn't he? That kind of conviction isn't made up for propaganda. That kind of conviction is someone that's really upset with people that are trying to bring down this country and when they lie. And one of the things Levine does is Mark gets in there and he fact checks a lot. He does lots of research before he speaks. If you haven't read any of his books, you should try one sometime. It's very interesting stuff. Anyway, getting into what he was talking about, let's just go from the top. Hitler, comparing Trump to Hitler. We did a segment on that. I don't buy it. I don't buy into it at all. And then when you start seeing the comparison throughout various presidents and people, how they were compared to Hitler, but then the people that are actually doing tyrannical things, like the Hamas leaders, are not. Isn't that amazing? And I like and don't like the way Levine pointed out people that survived the Holocaust and apologized. I like that part that he apologized for that. But I don't like the fact that the mainstream media likes to throw that out there like it's a gift. Oh, we're just going to compare this person to Hitler. Hitler was horrible. Absolutely horrible. And he almost won. Don't ever forget that. Now, going back into it, George Washington. How is Biden compared to George Washington in any way, shape, or form? Not at all. You know, he goes around and he does his speeches and does what he's told and reads his little cue cards. But trying to be compared, to George Washington, never. George Washington was a great leader and will always be remembered as a great leader. I do like the way Levine talks about in there that the fact that it's amazing how Biden's trying to compare himself to George Washington when for the first part of his presidency, everybody went around trying to take down all the statues and everything of our founding fathers because they were all racist and all these other things. And Biden stood right behind everybody, get rid of this nonsense and the whole 9 yards. And that's why I let that play through. So you could see some of the exposure of when Joe Biden was getting his start in the Senate back in the 70s, who he ran around with and who he palled up with. And back in the 70s, he was on the news talking about, one of the things that's going to set back civil rights is if you integrate the buses, meaning if blacks and whites ride buses to schools. He was very much against integration in the schools, and that little section in there about his kids growing up in a jungle, that was real. That wasn't made up. This stuff is so much older that people forget, especially because the mainstream media, they want to be on Joe Biden's team so they don't expose any of that stuff. Years ago, this should have been exposed. Years ago, it should have came out. So you understood who you were voting for. But what did they do? They turned around and they made Trump to be the racist, when Trump has done so much more for the various communities. Doesn't matter if you like or hate the guy. Do the facts check before you start to tear down his character, because he actually did. So leopards don't change their spots. And you will hear people say throughout your life that however somebody starts is actually who they are. Well, that is how Joe Biden started. That's who he ran with. That Southern Manifesto that went through Congress back in the 50s, yeah, that was for integration. That was to keep segregation in place. That's what that was all about. And for Biden to receive that desk with open arms, and he knew what it represented. He knew what it signified. Let's get real about all this, okay? Let's stop pointing fingers at the wrong party, especially the wrong person. And let's get back on where we need to go. If this country divides any further, think of what's going to happen. Think what would happen in this presidential election if we put the wrong person in office. I'm not talking about Trump or Biden. I'm just talking about the wrong person in office. Let's say both of them get taken out. Both of them lose presidential immunity, okay? And Biden gets prosecuted for what he's done, which is a lot. And this witch hunt that they put Trump on, I can't wait to see how this is going to play out. But let's just say both of them are gone and we get somebody else up there, like let's say Nikki Haley, who is just playing the puppet to the same game. She's got the same big money behind her right now that Biden had behind him. And guess where that's going to go? And she's on the other team, so that'll just tell you. So let's look at all of this into perspective, okay? President Trump gets up and speaks, and he calls it out exactly how he sees it. And I said in the beginning of this that, yes, he is a former president. He gets information that none of us will ever hear. He knows what's going on. So let's stop playing the game. Let's stop listening to the MSNBCs, NBC, CNN, Wall Street Journals. Let's stop listening to all this nonsense. And if they don't want to conform, then let them go out with Bud Light. Not trying to put people out of business because we don't agree with them. That's freedom of speech. We do agree with that. But what we don't agree with is called lying. Joe Biden's been doing that a lot lately. He was in a church the other day, a black church the other day, talking about how he started part of a civil rights movement. Never in his career has he started a civil rights movement. But he's starting to believe what they write down and tell him to say. Do you? That's the question. So, do us a favor. Put it in the comments. Let us know how you feel, what your thoughts are. I wasn't trying to be racist with any of that kind of stuff. That's not what this was. Not even close. This is showing you who the people are. Okay? So, like, share, and subscribe. We really want to hear from you. We really love you. We do look forward to seeing you again. And we're going to go ahead and end this one and hope that you have a great day, night, morning, whatever it is, wherever you are. Hopefully it's great. You take care. We'll see you again. Love all of you.